The amount of UFC fights getting canceled is getting out of hand. UFC 303 just concluded, and though the card turned out alright given the circumstances, especially with Alex exceeding expectations with his highlight KO over Yuri, they were still under shitty circumstances. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 canceled fights on this card alone. Starting with the main event, of course, we were supposed to see the return of notorious Conor McGregor, and at this point, he's more notorious for having Michael Chandler wait for 2 years now, as he has delayed this fight time and time and again. We were also supposed to have a banger of a co-main in Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, but this fell short of actually happening when Roundtree tested positive for a banned substance that he reportedly unintentionally took. But no worries, right? Carlos Ulberg was sent in to replace Khalil Roundtree, and now we had another interesting fight at 205, with Jamal Hill now set to face Carlos Ulberg. But disaster would strike again, as this time it was Jamal Hill having to pull out as he suffered an injury to his knee just weeks before UFC 303. Holy shit, okay, but at least the on-paper champion, Anthony Smith, could give Carlos Ulberg a fight. And you know, it's not really a banger, but at least we could see this fight play out, right? Wrong. Carlos Ulberg this time is the one with the knee injury and having to be pulled out. And so with Ulberg out, UFC brings in middleweight Roman Dolidze in, but that fight simply can't be the co-main. So Dana and Hunter pulled off an amazing co-main event with rising star and favorite Diego Lopez facing off against longtime veteran Brian Ortega. I honestly was looking forward to this fight the most, since I think we all knew how the Yuri and Alex fight was going to play out. In my opinion, this was the hardest fight to predict and the most interesting stylistic matchup. And so the card was set, and it looked like a solid card despite all the late changes. But something interesting happened last minute before the scales. Diego Lopez got a late call saying Brian Ortega couldn't make 145, and so this fight was set at 155, and both men would weigh in at the lightweight limit. And this is about where we all got convinced that this card was cursed, because the one fight we were all looking forward to gets canceled during the event, as Brian Ortega would literally pull out last second with an illness. So yeah, this card was absolute madness with the amount of last minute pullouts and last minute changes to this card, but this has been trending in the UFC for quite some time now. But what's been trending outside of the UFC are my friends and sponsors at Fume. The flavored air category is quickly becoming the alternative to vaping and smoking, and the sponsor of today's video, Fume, is leading the way in the flavored air market. They sent me over their award-winning flavored air device and also sent me a lot of flavors to choose from, and they all taste so dang good. I personally love the orange vanilla, and like advertised, it tasted like a sweet orange vanilla. And again, the best part is Fume is not a vape. That means no vapor, which means you can use it anywhere. That means no nicotine, so it's not addictive. And that also means no batteries, so you'd never have to charge it. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code TJLovesFights to get your free Fume base when you order the Journey Pack. It's the all-new magnetic stand for your Fume device. Head to TryFume, that's FUM.com, and use code TJLovesFights, or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume base when you order your Journey Pack today. Not too long ago at UFC Saudi Arabia, we were supposed to see another anticipated return of a star in Khamzat Chimaev until he pulled out last minute due to some sort of illness. Going back to UFC 295, we were supposed to see another return for a star in John Jones, but John had to pull out due to a pectoral tear. And this was a while back now, but we saw a huge card shift at UFC 294, where the original headliner of Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev 2 was supposed to happen, but Charles pulled out due to a nasty cut from sparring. And the co-main event was supposed to be Khamzat actually fighting an opponent at 185, but of course, Paulo Costa pulled out due to an elbow infection. It seems like with almost every single major UFC card, some of the most anticipated fights get canceled and late replacements follow suit. So of course the question is, why does this keep happening? I asked you guys the same question on my community poll, and for the most part the answer is shit happens. That's just life, right? A series of unfortunate events with the hope that something can be made up. Random injuries, illnesses, and pullouts are just a part of the sport, and UFC 303, with the amount of late notice changes, was just bad luck. But what if I were to say these things aren't actually random? What if I were to say that these injuries and illnesses are all connected somehow, and that there is a reason or a couple reasons for why fighters often pull out so close to the fight? And most importantly, because there is a common reason for these late pullouts, that there is a way we can stop this from happening. In today's video, let's theorize why so many fighters get ill or injured right before their fight, and let's think of ways that we can ensure the fights that we want to see happen actually happen. Starting with illness, I think I know why so many guys are getting violently ill right before their fight, and it has to do with the rapid weight cutting these guys are doing. Khamzat is notorious for having trouble making weight, in addition to being notoriously known for getting crazy sick over the course of his career, from COVID to this insane allergic reaction, and then most recently he was so sick he had to pull out with his fight against Robert Whittaker. I'm no medical expert, but I don't think the two are a coincidence, and I think we saw a similar thing with Brian Ortega. First of all, he wasn't even planning on making 145 with a short notice, as he got the fight rescheduled for 155, and then shortly after making 155, he got so sick to the point that he had to pull out of the fight entirely. You can check out my video I made on weight cutting I did a while back, but the one thing I didn't mention or didn't even consider is the effect of rapid weight cutting on the immune system. A great research paper did a study on the effects of weight loss on the immune system, specifically related to combat sports athletes cutting weight and the adverse effects it had on glutamine, which is something crucial to the immune system. And the results from their study on a group of combat sports athletes is essentially what we expected. From their study on the group of combat sports athletes going through a weight cut, they found depleting circulating glutamine levels, which led to impaired immune function and increased frequency of infections. Further, a clear increase in symptoms of infections was observed in both weight loss groups during and following rapid weight loss, but not in the control group. This suggests that athletes experienced some level of immunosuppression that was related to rapid weight loss. So yeah, I'm no medical expert, but again, the science seems to back that there is a strong correlation between the extreme weight cutting in the UFC and the severe illness and symptoms that often follow, like in the case of Khamzat and Brian Ortega. So how do we stop it? Adding more weight classes will definitely help. Past 155, guys have a tough decision to make because of the sparse amount of weight classes, going from 15 more pounds to 15 again, and then 20. These large weight gaps between weight classes forces guys to cut down massive to try to make 155 or 170 because the guys above them are so gigantic. If we add every 10 pounds up to 205, or at least break up 170 into 165 and 175, I think guys wouldn't have to cut so much weight, and we would see less immune systems become destroyed and the likelihood of a common cold or fever destroying the most anticipated fights of an event. The second bucket fighters of canceled fights fall into is injuries. We saw it recently with Conor, practically every light heavyweight at UFC 303, the big one with John Jones, and finally Charles Oliveira. And after seeing what Charles Oliveira's injury was so close to the fight, I understood why so many fighters get injured badly right before their upcoming fight. And the reason is hard sparring and intense grappling sessions in training camps. We saw it with Charles, who was sparring hard with no headgear in the build-up to his rematch with Islam, which led to Charles getting a nasty cut on his head, and it was confirmed that Conor broke his pinky toe through sparring. And I just don't get it. Obviously, I do understand that sparring is pretty integral to any training camp in preparation to a fight, but the intensity and especially the proximity to the fight is what's concerning. There's this the more you bleed in training, the less you'll bleed in war mentality, but that often leads to never seeing war because you bled out in training. Max Holloway could be onto something, as he famously said that he didn't even spar before the Calvin Kattar fight, and he doesn't really spar at all. Guys on Max's, Conor's, and Charles's level shouldn't be sparring hard or even sparring at all. I see hard sparring and grappling like cramming for a test the night right before. There's practically no point. You're just going to stress your head and not get good sleep or rest. And by that point, everything has been said. The preparation and training has already been done, and the weeks and days leading up to a fight really should be just going through your notes, flowing in mitt work, and more strategy building rather than conditioning. So how do we stop guys from getting injured weeks before a fight? Now, the irony of this is that I'm uploading this right after July 4th, so I do feel the freedom coursing through my veins, but I do think there should be something in these guys' contracts to prevent them from hard sparring 2 or 3 weeks before a fight. Yeah, that's some Big Brother dystopian type shit, but considering a vast majority of pullouts are due to injuries and hard sparring, we have to enforce this somehow. The UFC already has a stipulation in fighters' contracts preventing them from doing extreme sports like snowboarding, bungee jumping, etc. that Cowboy Cerrone complained about, so they could and should add something similar to this, preventing fighters from sparring a couple weeks before a fight. Really, the best way to prevent sparring-related injuries before a fight is to change the culture of sparring and especially sparring in training camps, and to encourage more flowy and technique-driven sparring instead of this mindset of being the toughest guy in the gym. But in actuality, that kind of culture shift in gyms will take a very long time. So in the meantime, the UFC should enforce something to prevent guys from hard sparring just a couple days before their fight. But however the UFC may try to prevent illness and injuries from ruining great fights, all I wanted to show with this video is that these pullouts are not likely just a string of misfortune and bad luck. So if there is a connection to the uptick in canceled fights, the good part is that we have identified it, and all we need now is a solution. But of course, what do you guys think? Are these random pullouts really just random and it's just a series of bad luck? Or is there truly a reason for why we are seeing so many illnesses and injuries that lead to canceled fights? And again, thank you guys for watching and supporting, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. And also, shout out Fume again. Please check them out in the description below.